Hi, glad your chaplain, making connection with you again. Major Glad Young home from the Salvation Army, chaplain to Salisbury House, hostel, life house for the homeless in St Helens, going through this period of isolation, social distancing due to COVID-19, and reading for you the book of Max the Miracle Dog by Kerry Irving. Reading part of chapter 3. Sit back, relax, enjoy it. God bless. Chapter 3. Hard Times. The accident resulted in a driving ban for my father. More immediately, such a narrow escape for us all shook our family to the core. Sadly, it didn't bring my parents any closer together. As soon as Mum learned what had happened, she went straight to the court to contest that our dad wasn't fit to look after us. Until that moment, my middle brother and I had never questioned whether our father's drinking was an issue. At the hearing, our mother complained that it was more than an isolated incident. From that moment on, I started looking at my dad in a different light. Whenever he had a beer, which seemed to be more frequently at home after he lost his licence. Mum also had other pressing reasons to have us back. Shortly after the incident, my dad started seeing a woman from the local shoe repairers. She would quickly become our stepmother. Through my mother's eyes, her arrival in his life saw us sidelined. We were frequently left to feed ourselves, wore dirty school uniforms held together by safety pins. At the same time, whenever we saw her, Mum stopped being a shadow of her former self and began to sparkle again. It wasn't long before she introduced me to the man who would become my stepfather. He seemed nice, and clearly he made her happy, so that was all right by me. As the relationship duly developed, they even found a place to live together in Penarth. As the relationship duly developed, they even found a place to live together in Penrith. It all helped her case when she argued that her boys would be better off living with her. So along with my middle brother, I went back to live with our mother. Once the divorce came through, our mum remarried. It really did seem as if she was creating a new chapter in our lives. In some ways, it was a honeymoon period for us all. Had I been a little older, I would have known that it would always come to an end. If my stepfather resented the fact that his new wife came with kids as part of the package, he didn't keep it himself for long. After a short time, it became clear to my middle brother and me that this new family figurehead considered us to be a nuisance. To begin with, he would fall silent in our presence, as if we were interrupting something. It made us feel uncomfortable. It didn't get any worse than that when my mother was around. She was enamoured with him to notice and just didn't see what was happening. She worked in a restaurant, often through the evenings. That's when things really began to change. Alone in the house with us, my stepfather made no attempt to make his feelings known. When he didn't just blank us completely, or mutter that we were in his way, He'd launch into profanities against our dad. It was as if he regarded him as responsible for the fact that his new life with our mother was weighed down with her boys. I couldn't blame my middle brother when he turned 16, left school, and announced that he was moving out. He found a living job in a hotel, which left me with a man who openly despised me. "You're good for nothing, Irving," he muttered, like my surname was some kind of curse. Then came the house rules. My stepfather just seemed to introduce them at will in a bid to contain me. I wasn't allowed to switch on the lights unless he was in the room, because I'd be wasting his money. In the same way, the television was a luxury only he could afford. Come winter time, lighting the fire to keep warm was out of the question. If my stepfather was chilly, however, then he'd demand to know why I hadn't got it going, and then reprimand me until the house was an acceptable temperature. Life revolved around him all right. If he tolerated me under the same roof as him, it was by the thinnest of margins. Then it was on a seen but not heard basis. Any kind of noise I made, from scraping a chair to sit down, or cause the stairs to creak as I crept upstairs, would earn me a tongue lashing. The control he exerted became increasingly stifling. It reached the point where I practically couldn't even breathe in his presence. In short, it felt as if the sole purpose of his existence was to make me feel as unwelcome in his house as possible. As a boy, approaching his teenage years, all of this affected me greatly. Inside the house, feeling like I didn't belong, and constantly on the edge in case my stepfather turned against me. All I could do was go to a place in my head and shut down. As a result, I just took every opportunity to stay away. As long as I obeyed his evening curfew and was home by 8 o'clock without fail, I spent as much time outside as I possibly could. One year, my grandfather from Penrith presented me with a bike. I don't know if he had a sense of how things were for me at home, but I leapt at the chance to get away. The Rally Arena was a racer with drop handlebars. In those days, it was a popular bike with kids, as a first grown-up bike, and I loved the freedom that it gave me. I'd learned to get away on foot from an early age, but this changed everything. No matter how bad things had got at home, I could climb onto the saddle and pedal away as far as possible. To begin with, before I found my riding confidence, I would head for the paths around the school playing field and ride around the perimeter. Sometimes the caretaker would come chasing after me, which made me all the more determined to keep going. Anything but break away and head home before I was ready. I imagine I drove the poor man to distraction, but he got a break as soon as I became more adventurous and took myself further afield. I probably only went a couple of miles, but to a young lad feeling this trapped, I felt like a bird with wings. For some kids with troubled backgrounds, school can become a sanctuary. I wanted it to feel like a place of safety, where I could be myself. but if it was raining on a school day, my stepfather would refuse to take me. As I plodded through the puddles, he didn't even glance in my direction if he happened to go past. I just watched his car drive on by. So I suppose it's no surprise that I struggled to fit in when I got there. I was tough, I think. To switch off the defences that I'd built to survive at home was too much. In general, I just kept my own company, and I had a very small group of friends. Even then, it was a struggle to find common ground. Sometimes they would come into school talking about programmes that they'd watched the evening before, like Grange Hill or Mork and Mindy, and all I could do was nod along and try not to feel left out. They knew about my stepfather and his treatment of me. But then, if I ever dared to bring anyone home, he might choose to be really nice. Much depended on his opinion of their intelligence. Having left school at 11, my stepfather basically regarded people who showed a hint of wit or brains as being a legitimate target for his scorn and condescension. If he deemed them to be unthreatening in that respect, and he'd crack a joke with them, usually at my expense. He could even be funny, and they would laugh, and in that way it made it worse for me, because they'd wonder what my problem was with him. As the years ticked by, my stepfather continued with his campaign of venom against me. A couple of years after I started secondary school, my mother was given a puppy called Prince by my uncle. Prince was a black and white Sprocker, which is a mix between Springer and Cocker Spaniel. It was great to have a dog again, and finally have fun and a joyful companion. I'd take Prince out on walks and attempt to train him to sit, fetch, lie down, roll over. He was a smart dog, and it was my first introduction to the Spaniel breed. Along with Prince, there was just something about the look that he'd give me that made me feel special. He depended on me for guidance, even if it was only just a glance back at a fork in a woodland path, just so to see which way I planned to turn. Nobody had ever looked at me like that before. On walks, it gave me a sense of purpose, and also familiarity with dogs that stay with me throughout my life. We'll come back to the rest of the chapter tomorrow. It's late, and I would say good night, God bless, and I'd pray a blessing on you just now. Right where you are, may you know that God is with you, that He leads you to those quiet places in your heart where He will speak to you. Know that He blesses and watches over you, that He listens to you with gentle understanding, that He is with you always, wherever you are and however you may feel. Good night, God bless, love you,